On behalf of Youth at Bruce, I would like to say thank you for coming today, and good afternoon.
All right, guys, this concludes the TEDx live portion of the event. Let's break for 10 minutes, and we're going to be back in here for Q&A with all our guest speakers. First, we have a couple of words.
Yeah, so a lot of people have helped us bring this event together, and we'd like to take a moment to thank them. First off, we'd like to thank these guys in the back, Steve Klein, George, and Bob of Firelight Media for making this live webcast possible. Chicken Joe's, proud home of GHS's main grub, provided the food for us all to enjoy, along with Sweet Lisa's, who gave us Fairfield County's best cookies, hauled over a huge load, and we're really grateful for that. Also, our friends at Arctic Live in California sent us a massive cake to celebrate the Arctic National Wildlife Refuges 50th anniversary. We'll bring that out. A big shout out to Cree Productions, whose original music opened the show. REI gave us these wonderful water bottles that y'all received on your way in, and Chili Bear designed these shirts that y'all got as well. And most importantly, we want to give a big, big thank you to everybody at the Bruce who strongly believe in the power of youth that allowed us to organize this event.
And also, we want to give one big thank you to the one person that this would never be possible without, with Marianne. I think Marianne's in the back. If she could please come out. That is Marianne, our leader. We would never be able to do it without her. And I speak for the group when we say that, Marianne, you're the best. And thank you guys for coming.
We'll have our question and answer section coming up. Stick around if you want to ask the speakers anything.
Welcome back. At this time, I would like to open this session to all our guest speakers' questions. Denise Savageau, Director of Conservation of the Town of Greenwich, is also here to answer any local concerns you may have. When you're asking a question, please state your question clearly and to whom the question is addressed to, such as this question is for Andrew Revkin or this question is for the whole panel. Let's begin with my first question for all the panel. Most people regard the National Wildlife Refuges as pristine areas reserved for wildlife. However, we often hear that refuges experience a wide variety for other uses. Refuges have also been used for natural resource extraction, military operations, as well as recreational use. How do we define protection? Is it subject to the people's priorities, or are there strict, measurable guidelines that we must adhere to? Who wants to start?
Let me handle that just from a local perspective, because I'm not sure how many of you know that we have a National Wildlife Refuge here in Greenwich. The McKinney National Wildlife Refuge is in Connecticut, and it's a series of islands, offshore islands, that stretch from Westbrook, Connecticut to Greenwich, and Calf Island here is part of the McKinney National Wildlife Refuge. And one of the things we've been struggling with in terms of the management of that particular refuge is how much recreation should we allow on this island. As you can imagine, Greenwich is very populated, as is the whole Atlantic seaboard. And one of the reasons the McKinney Wildlife Refuge is so important, it is part of the Atlantic Flyway. So all the migrating birds that come up from South America make stops at all of our islands. They actually, some of them nest on our islands, and then, but then some of them use them, the migratory birds, some of them go even further north, and possibly even to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, because they take a real circuitous route across Canada and get over there. So it's really important. So one of the things we struggle with is there's a lot of people here who think that whenever we protect a piece of open space, it should be used for recreation and should be open to public access. So one of the things is, how do you manage public access? How do we not love our national wildlife to death? And so how do we balance that need for wildlife, especially for the birds who are either stopping and or nesting on these islands? So that is something that we really do look at. And then I think I'll refer to the National Wildlife Manager, and he can probably talk about how the refuges are used other places.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you. There's over 500 units in the National Wildlife Refuge system. The Arctic Refuge, which you heard about today, is really at the far end of the spectrum of these 500 refuges, both in size and its naturalness, perhaps. Many other refuges in the system are established with specific purposes in the legislation that established the refuge or in the executive order that established the refuge. And that often is the most fundamental guiding principle that helps the managers decide how it's going to be managed. But in more recent times, public land managers have learned that there has to be a dialogue between the government agency that is taking care of these public lands, because they're only custodians of the public's assets. And we have to have a dialogue with the public themselves to have this exchange of information so that people understand what the refuge was originally set up for, and as Denise said, how much recreation is too much. And so we need to have this dialogue and hopefully through our democratic process arrive at good principles. The refuge system is protected by a number of laws. The most important one recently was the National Wildlife Refuge Improvement Act. And in it, it spells out the primary purposes of the refuge system. And one of those components is that each refuge has its own specific purposes, and that's the fundamental guideline for how it's to be taken care of. So in a broad spectrum, that's what the refuge system and how these things happen. But there's certainly room for a lot of public input and participation in how our refuges are managed. And Andrew mentioned this new refuge visioning process that the Fish and Wildlife Service is involved in right now. And you can go online if you type in, it's americaswildlife.org, and it'll pop you into the website for getting public involvement in the future direction and vision for the whole National Wildlife Refuge system. And I'd encourage you to check that out. There's some great opportunities for blogging, bold ideas, or you can look at the whole document that the agency has drafted so far and comment on it. And it'll be open for public comment until Earth Day. I believe that's the 22nd of April, I believe. So it's a great opportunity for everybody to get involved with it.
Thank you. Would you like to say something?
I was just going to I was just going to mention that deadline of it's open for your comment right now. That's all I can say.
Yes.
Fish and Wildlife is reviewing Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, a coastal plain for wilderness value. Not only coastal plain, but any part of the whole 19 million acres. So it's in that process too. We need public inputs there. Sometimes when the Arctic National Wildlife get really critical, we made some friends throughout the nation. Sometimes I call them or email them and said, act on this now. And that really helps to have a voice from somewhere else besides just the area, because Alaska, politics is really oil. That's all they want up there. So it's really hard. We're just a small minority up there. So it really helps from other areas because you have voice just as much as Alaskan does. But they said it's, because of oil, they want oil. They will say, and the outside have no right to tell us what to do. That's what they say.
Just one quick point I would add to Sarah's, and that is that in early April, the Fish and Wildlife Service will be releasing its draft comprehensive conservation plan. And that's where the plan that Sarah mentioned, where they are reviewing the possibility of other wilderness designation within the Arctic Refuge. And it also lays out the guidelines for the next 15 to 20 years of how the refuge will be administered with regards to things like recreation and other activities in the refuge. So it's, again, that plan will be coming out in early April, just almost any day now. And it'll be out for a 90-day comment period, and you can go online and track that one down and get involved with reviewing that, especially if you'd like to participate in the issue regarding the future protection of the Arctic Refuge.
Thank you all for your responses.